Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening for our panel discussion, How to Be an Effective Activist. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis, and I'm proud to represent the communities of Malden, Melrose, Reading, Stoneham, Wakefield, and Winchester. One of my favorite quotes is from the anthropologist Margaret Mead, who said, quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." In these past few years, where we've seen so much political turmoil and upheaval across our country, more and more people have asked me how they can get involved in local government or politics, get more involved at the state level and at the federal level as well. And how can they most effectively influence public policies that they care deeply about and bring about positive change in our communities, in our Commonwealth, and in our nation? As a state legislator, I hear from local advocates and constituents on a daily basis on a wide variety of critical issues, from climate change to education policy to transportation and racial justice, and many others. All of these issues are critically important to improving the quality of life and creating greater opportunity and equity for everyone in our Commonwealth. But tonight, we're not going to focus on any one particular issue. Rather, we're going to discuss the strategies and tactics employed by skilled and effective local activists. My hope is that this will give you helpful insights into how you or your organization can get more involved in whatever issue or issues are most important to you, and how you can help bring about positive changes at the local, state, or federal level. I want to thank my colleagues and partners in the state legislature, Representatives Mike Day, Kate Lipper-Garabedian, Steve Altrino, Paul Donato, Brad Jones, and Donald Wong, with whom I work very closely. I also want to recognize and thank all of our local elected and appointed officials who volunteer their time and work tirelessly to improve our communities. All of us value hearing from you, our constituents, and we always welcome your questions, feedback, and your advocacy. I want to also thank my terrific staff who make all of our work possible. And this evening, I want to specifically thank Tom Dalton and Emily Graniff for organizing this forum. My office has put together a brief PowerPoint presentation that explains the state legislative process in Massachusetts and how you can get involved to advocate for legislation that you care about. So Tom is going to post that right now in the Facebook chat, and we won't take the time to present it now because I don't want to take away from our terrific panelists, but I encourage you to take a look at that presentation afterwards and certainly follow up with any questions. So the plan for this evening is for us to first hear briefly from each of our four fantastic panelists. Then we look forward to responding to your questions. Please type your questions into the Facebook comments, and we'll try to respond to as many of them as we have time for. All right, without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. We're first going to hear from Casey Bowers. Casey joined the Environmental League of Massachusetts in 2018. As the Assistant Vice President for Government Relations, Casey is responsible for developing and achieving ELM's policy goals across state, federal, and local government. And for those of you who don't know them, ELM is one of the leading advocacy groups on environmental issues and climate change. Casey previously served as the American Lung Association of the Northeast's Massachusetts Director of Public Policy, where her portfolio included work on renewable energy, lung diseases, and air quality. Casey has a wealth of policy knowledge, legislative expertise, and organizing skills, including from her time serving as the field organizer for a statewide campaign to protect, enforce, and strengthen the Clean Air Act. Casey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Senator.
I think we're going to maybe start off by asking you if you could sort of speak to our audience about what you think is the most effective way to get the attention and the support of elected officials like state legislators.
That's a good question, and thank you for having me. And I'm really honored to be joined by my fellow panelists when they pop up on screen. But I do think one of the most important things that you can do is actually start to build a relationship with your state legislator. And I'm glad that the senator also mentioned his wonderful staff, because sometimes, or I should say in many cases, it's really important that you work with staff, whether it be the chief of staff, the district director, the legislative aide. These are folks who really know what's happening on the ground day to day, and are really the ones who are putting their nose to the grindstone and doing a lot of the work on issues that you care about. So I'd say make sure that you reach out with a personalized email. I know it's really easy to do the form emails. We send out those templates all the time. But if you really want to make yourself stick out, I would personalize it a little bit, and then also never be afraid to pick up the phone, especially now when we can't really do many in-person events. So I'm looking forward to hearing more and also learning from my fellow panelists. And once again, thank you, Senator, for having me.
Thanks a lot, Casey, and thanks for all the great work you do on climate and environmental issues and other issues, working with us in the state legislature and other branches of government too. So next, it's my pleasure to introduce Farrah Ridore. Farrah's involvement in politics started back when she joined the College Democrats as a freshman at Drew University in New Jersey. And I'll add as a side note that that's actually very close to where I attended middle school and high school before I moved to the Boston area.
Very nice.
And like me, Farrah, after college, she, in this case, she returned to her hometown of Stoneham, and she has since continued her political activism. In 2016, she worked for the Massachusetts Democratic Party and was a field organizer on the re-election campaign for State Representative Mike Day. She's very active in the community and most recently organized and co-led a local Black Lives Matter event. Farrah is passionate about fighting for social justice issues. She currently serves as the regional director for Greater Boston and Metro West in the office of United States Senator Elizabeth Warren. So in my office, we work closely with Farrah and her colleagues when there are any federal issues or federal constituent needs that we need to collaborate on. So Farrah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And why don't we start off by you talking to us about what you think is the biggest barrier or barriers to more of our young people getting involved in local politics and activism, and what advice do you have for your fellow young people to get more involved?
Fantastic question, and thank you so much, Senator, for having me today. Well, I think it's important to note that young people today are realizing the importance of getting involved in politics at every level, but particularly at the local level as well. We're seeing in several communities throughout our district, as well as in the Commonwealth, where young people are leading, are organizing marches and speaking up against injustices that they see in their communities. Young people are also paying attention to what's happening around them, and they are realizing that that if they don't act now, that they will be inheriting a world that is far more dangerous and hurtful to them in the future. So, for example, in my community in Stoneham, I've seen young people, such as myself, come together and organize, groups and initiatives. I want to just give out a special shout out to Stoneham Stands, which I've been working with and coordinating with, particularly recently when I helped co-lead the Black Lives Matter rally that happened in Stoneham a few weeks ago. So I definitely think that the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others was definitely a wake-up call for everyone, but especially for young people, witnessing such tragedy, especially, to those that are close in age with them. I think it's important that young people continue to voice their concerns, voice their opinions on racial justice issues, while also creating space for themselves at higher level discussion tables. Advice that I guess I could give is just to start off small. A simple conversation with your neighbor, or just calling out a friend that you see is saying something or doing something that is harmful to another individual, getting involved, in any level, in any shape or form, donating to campaigns and organizations that are committed to these fights, doing whatever you can, to be a part of this movement. And one thing I'd like to stress and end as well is that this isn't just a one-time thing. You're not just making a one-time donation, or you're not just participating in one march or one rally, and then that's it, case closed. This is a continuous thing that we have to do as a community, especially locally, to hold others accountable. So it's going to take a lot of work, and I think young people are definitely ready and up for the challenge. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's more to come in terms of events happening here in the district, and happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you, Farrah. And I agree with you. They are definitely up for the challenge. And it's been fantastic to see how young people have organized around issues like gun violence in recent years, climate change, of course, racial justice, and other issues. And, as an elected official, I would add that I certainly care about and listen to feedback that I receive from any of my constituents and advocacy groups, but it does have a particular impact on me when I hear from young people. There's just something about when you have a high school student, or even middle school students and college students and just other young people who take the time to learn about an issue, get involved, aren't intimidated to reach out to the elected officials. And believe me, there's no reason to feel intimidated. We're here to represent you. It really has an impact. So I think young people have more power, and they're starting to realize this, I think, and more of a voice than many of them even think. So thank you for your good work. All right, so next I'm delighted to introduce to our panel, Amanda Smith. Amanda, as many of you know, I'm sure, lives in Malden and has been a volunteer community organizer in the greater Boston area for over 15 years, volunteering on numerous campaigns from the presidential to the municipal level and literally everything in between. Amanda is a founding partner of the political consulting firm, the Campaign Institute, where she helped manage a number of successful campaigns, including the re-election of Mayor Gary Christensen in Malden, and also my re-election campaign. Thank you, Amanda. She also served as field director for Steve Altrino's successful first campaign for state representative. She has conducted numerous community organizing and campaign management training sessions for Mass Alliance and other groups. Amanda is the former chair and vice chair of the Malden Democratic City Committee. She's also a member of the Mass Democratic State Committee, where she co-chairs the Campaign Services Subcommittee. So it's probably safe to say that nobody knows more about effective and successful campaigns and organizing than Amanda Smith does. So naturally, the question for you, Amanda, is talk to us about what role campaigns and elections play in local activism and building grassroots movements, and how can folks who are listening this evening get more involved and leverage campaigns to advance their policy goals? So really the connection between campaigns and issues that somebody cares passionately about. Right.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege to be on this panel with such amazing women. And I just want to thank Jason and also his staff for all their work putting this together. It's a lot of work to put something like this together. It makes it look really simple, but there's so much that goes into it. I'm well aware. So what I would say is campaigns and elections are opportunities. And there are a lot of ways there are opportunities, some of which are probably more obvious than others. Campaigns are an opportunity for groups on the ground, grassroots groups that organize around issues, to decide to offer or withhold their support and labor and money and energy in order to try to get what they want in terms of advancing a cause or an issue. But campaigns and elections are also opportunities for building and experience and skill building, not organizational building and skill building. And I think that often goes overlooked, and they can feel very intimidating, especially if you're a young person or even if you're not. They seem sort of like these weird, entities that, how do you get into them? And especially at the local level, the municipal level, the state legislative level. My experience has been, and it's probably not every community, but a lot of these campaigns are run on a shoestring, really, and they need people that can do everything. And so if you are an enthusiastic, energetic person, campaigns are an opportunity for you to network, meet new people, build organization in your community in whatever version you're looking to build, and also for yourself to gain skills and credibility and so forth. That's certainly been my experience. I didn't start out as someone who got paid to be involved in managing aspects of campaigns. I started out as a volunteer. One of the things that a lot of campaigns at a smaller level have is some kind of kitchen cabinet or sort of inner circle of varying sizes where people from the community kind of sit at a table, maybe every other week or so, and advise the candidate and their staff on strategy. And that's a fantastic opportunity to affect the trajectory of a campaign, frankly. But I liked what something Farrah said about long-term. I think a lot of folks I like to call it community organizing as opposed to activism. Activism to me sometimes feels like a lot of talking, whereas organizing is actually doing and building relationships and building events and tangible things that move the ball down the field, as opposed to a lot of this. It's easy to do this, it's much harder to build. But building is what actually creates change. And you have to, in my opinion, and I think Casey referred to this as well, it's about building relationships, and that takes time. And some of it's strategic, in any given campaign. What can I build for this year, but also next year and the year after? What young people can I help to activate, but also train? One of the things that I think is painfully lacking a lot of times at the campaign level and also nonprofit and sort of community organizing level is an ethic of training, that people do not come out of the womb trained on how to organize, how to treat people with respect, how to listen as opposed to talk. And all of those things are integral to either a movement or a campaign that is effective. And this was one of the reasons the Obama campaign in 2008 was so effective. They trained every single person on their team, which took a lot of time and energy, but it paid off. It paid off immensely, as we all saw. So I would just like to make a plug also for bigger campaigns, like statewide campaigns and presidential campaigns. There are a lot of people who come out of the woodwork in those kinds of cycles that don't pay attention in the in-between times. So it's an opportunity for organizations to build their membership, to train and bring into leadership lots of new people, and just to volunteering, to make super volunteers out of people that show up once every 4 years. And if you're not ready for that influx of people, which is what we're seeing right now, you're going to miss all those people. We saw this with Elizabeth Warren's first US Senate campaign. There were just people came out of the woodwork, and a lot of those people are still involved. So that's a great legacy. One of the things I'm working on right now, and then I'll stop, I'm organizing for the Biden campaign here locally in our region. So if anyone's interested in plugging into that, we have a Facebook called Metro North for Joe Biden. All our events and all our stuff is there. Happy to chat. I'm looking for team leaders, so if anyone's interested, message me. And so there's a lot of opportunities in a cycle like this for people to get involved. So it's exciting, I think.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I just want to echo the point Amanda made about when it comes to campaigns, there's so many different ways you can get involved and contribute. You can, and it depends on what time you have available and what your interest is and what your comfort level is, to be honest. And there's lots of different ways to make a contribution. And, when you have so much at stake, obviously in our presidential election, control of the United States Senate, but even when talking local or state races, every bit matters. You never know which election is going to come down to literally 1 or 2 or 3 votes. And I've seen several of those, in the time I've been involved. And I'm sure Amanda can speak to numerous elections that were extraordinarily close, right? Where that little bit of extra help makes a difference. I know it can be intimidating for people, particularly at first, and particularly things like making phone calls. I know my daughter, who's a college student, was making calls this weekend, working with Amanda for the Biden campaign. And I know she was very nervous about picking up the phone and cold calling people in Pennsylvania, but she did great. And I think she even, convinced a couple people about in terms of how they would vote. So,
Jason, can I just mention one other thing that I forgot that's actually really important? One other thing that a lot of people at the local level don't realize they have the power to do is recognize awesome candidates, potential candidates that are coming up in your community, and championing them, talking to them about, hey, have you thought about running for office? And maybe figuring it's a 4-year cycle till they do run, but your community and you can find those people, those diamonds, and people at some high level in the state party, they don't know those people, and so we all have that power in our own community to also have our eyes and ears open for kind of the awesome, hardworking, unconventional, potentially candidate who just needs a little help.
That's such a great point. And it makes me think of our own Congresswoman, Catherine Clark, who was on the school committee in Melrose, a decade ago or so, and then elected to the state legislature, and then elected to Congress, and now is one of the top Democrats on Nancy Pelosi's leadership team. So great example of that. All right. So the other point that Amanda made is the importance of action. Get really figuring out what the tasks are and getting to work. And, none of these things are easy. When you care about a campaign or you care about a policy issue or a cause, it's not easy. It takes hard work. It takes resilience, determination, and patience, whether you're an elected official working to make change or you're an activist working to make change. But somebody who really has figured out how to mobilize action from people is our next panelist, and that's Laura Wilson. So I'm delighted to introduce our final panelist this evening, Laura Wilson. After participating in the Women's March back in 2017, Laura Wilson founded the POP Huddle, and I'll let her explain more about what that is, but it's a grassroots organization in the town of Reading. Laura's focus is on action. The more than 500 members at this point of the POP Huddle receive monthly action lists and election guides, and also have access to daily action items on the group's Facebook page. In the past 3 years in leading the POP Huddle, Laura has learned a lot about how to engage and to support people who have not previously been active in politics at any level, but now want to get involved and want to know how they can make a difference. So Laura, thanks a lot for joining us and all of your good work. And why don't you talk to us about what you think is the best way for people who have not previously been involved in politics or advocacy to get involved and get engaged in an effective whether that be at the local level, the state level, or even national politics and activism.
Great. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. I'm also thrilled to be here with this great panel, and I appreciate everyone's work to offer this to everybody. I was a high school teacher before I had children and before I became politically active, and I would always, I was a history teacher, and we always had to do research papers. I always made them do research papers. And I found a lot of kids really struggled when they had a giant assignment like a research paper that counted for like a third of their grade. They would get immobilized and they would get overwhelmed, and it was really difficult for them to kind of follow through. And so I needed as a teacher to sort of break down those big giant projects and make it easier for people to know what the expectations were and to make it less overwhelming so that they wouldn't just at the last minute throw something together. And I kind of feel like activism is sort of like that. It's so overwhelming to dip your toe in and you don't know where to start, especially right now where there are so many things on fire that it's hard to know where do we start, how do we even get into this. So I feel like my role is as that, just like in the high school teacher would for the research paper, and kind of piggybacking on what Farrah said, is to break things down and make things a little bit more accessible and small and easy for people to kind of think about, as opposed to, I've got to fix, racism today. Well, that's not going to happen today. So let's maybe make it a little bit of a smaller chunk, get that bill passed, get that candidate elected, as opposed to, thinking of it as like a giant, issue you have to solve. That would be my first thing. And then the second thing I would say is to find a curator. And I call people like this a curator. I consider myself a curator. I would say Amanda right now is a curator of, the Biden campaign. Find someone who is going to do that chunking for you. Do that splitting up of that giant job of like electing Joe Biden or doing all the things that we need to do. You need to chunk it. You need to make small pieces out of that giant thing. So find someone who can do that for you. Now, there's lots of places you can get things like that. You can go to Facebook pages that are for local areas like Reading, the town Democrats or whatever it is. There's the Indivisible Guide, which is a website which provides actions of all kinds over all kinds of issues. There's something called 5 Calls, which is an app. It does all kinds of phone calls you can make to push certain pieces of legislation. Those are great curators. They're great places to go to find small, easy to do things that you can, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just have to make these 5 phone calls and then I'm done. Not all our problems solved, but we can see, and then maybe you can see, oh, that legislation passed. Look, I did that. I helped do that. The other thing I would say is, and that's what the POP Huddle really is, and Senator Lewis sort of introduced the concept. We have a daily action item that's, again, a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not big. It's something very concrete. Call your local, your local legislators to support this piece of legislation, whatever it is. And then we have a monthly action list. We normally have a meeting, which of course we don't right now with the quarantine happening. But normally we have a meeting with about 20 to 30 action items on the table. They are local, federal, and state. And I do a mailing list now with all of that and an email so people can pick and choose what things. I kind of think of it like a smorgasbord, a buffet of action that people can take what they want and do it. And I think that's really important. Senator Lewis kind of mentioned this too, is you got to figure out what works for you. This is the third thing. Figure out what you're comfortable with. What's your comfort level? How much time do you have to give? How much energy do you want to spend? What are like absolutely, hard nose? Like I am not canvassing, but I will go and make phone calls. I don't have enough money to donate a whole lot of money, but I have time because I have a flexible work schedule. Figure out what are the things that are going to work for you. That's a really important one that I would say a lot of people, once you know that, then you can look for those types of opportunities as opposed to, trying to do everything. Another one is to socially commit. So we all know that going to the gym is a lot more likely if we say to a friend that we're going to have them come with us. We're much more likely to go. And I would say to get started in activism, that's a really good idea, is to say, hey, will you go to this event with me? Or we'll go do phone banking together, or whatever. You'll be much more likely to follow through. I use as a grassroots organizer, I use a lot of sign-up geniuses and Facebook comments, because everybody else is seeing that you just committed to do that. You better follow through. And I'm not going to call anybody out, but at the same time, I think it is more motivating for us all as individuals. If we promise to do something in public, we're much more likely to do it. It's kind of like I said, going to the gym. And I would say people like that. They like being held accountable. They're much more likely to do it. And if that is your goal, to try and be more involved, I would suggest doing that too. And the last one I would say is to definitely look for events that have all the details already written out. I think there's nothing worse for a new activist than to say, like, how do you want to help? Like something really vague like that. I don't think it really works for new activists, because new activists don't really know what that means. Does that mean that am I knocking on doors? Am I calling? Am I putting yard signs out? What does that mean? How much time is that? And to have a more concrete concept of what exactly that is. So if you're not comfortable, make sure that you try to find those opportunities where all the details are there and you can really, you really know what's expected, and then you can go in very confident because you know exactly what you're getting into. Those would sort of be my big things, is to sort of know what you're interested in, how you want to participate. Try not to get immobilized and overwhelmed by it, by really chunking it into these small things, and to try and find a curator that kind of can help you do that, because I think that is a really difficult thing if you're just starting out. And I do have my email. I think we're going to put it up. So people want to be added to the Pop Huddle email and get on my mailing list so they can see what this looks like. You don't have to, just because I said there's pressure, there's no pressure to participate. If people would like to see what this looks like, they can email me and get on the mailing list. And obviously it's a lot of local stuff for Reading, but there's a fair amount of state and federal stuff as well. So, feel free to check it out. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And I always get a kick when I do visit the Pop Huddle. Laura always says to me, now don't talk too much, because this is not about talking. This is about action. So
yeah, sorry.
I always have to make sure my remarks are very succinct.
Well, that's why I was nervous about tonight. I'm like, I got to be fast tonight.
You're in the tables on you here.
The tables, yeah, totally.
That's right. All right. Well, Tom tells me we've got tons of questions coming in. So, Tom, let's go to you. And let's see. First question. Thank you, Mary Shannon Thomas. Passion with pragmatism. Oh, this is a good one. Seems like compromise might be more likely to create change, but okay. All right. So this is a great place to start, right? Because in many ways, politics is about the art of compromise, working with people with different perspectives, backgrounds, different ideologies, parties. As an activist, usually you're drawn in because you're really super passionate about an issue. So that tension between the passion about an issue and how far you believe we need to go, and then sort of being able to affect that change. Who wants to start with that one? Maybe Casey, do you want to maybe start with that, put you on the spot in terms of, because you've worked a lot with the legislature. ELM has advocated to go, very far on what we need to do on climate change. So you've had to deal with this before. Maybe you can start us off.
Sure. So I think that's a really good question, and something we see in the environmental community a lot, because there is so much to get done in order to address climate change. The question can often be like, are we doing enough this session? And I think luckily we have seen with both the Senate and the House that the legislature has agreed that we need to address climate every session. And, that can be difficult knowing that it's a 2-year session, and, we're down to the last 2 weeks, and, we're hoping the House will do something soon. And so I think, it becomes a push and tug, with different, and I think part of it when you're getting involved in different issues, you can see which organization is going to fit your needs. So, I would say that generally speaking, ELM tends to be in that let's get something done and move the ball down the road now I'm mixing metaphors. Clearly the heat is getting to me. Move the ball down the field. I think there's something to be said about having goals and achieving them and getting something done that's pushing us closer to where we need to be rather than getting nothing, because the balance is getting nothing, right? You could get something, you might get everything you want, or you might get nothing. And push comes to shove, I'm always someone who would like to see something get done because I believe you can build off of it for next year. And I think it can also be demoralizing if you can't get something. So last year we saw an increase in the amount of renewables that the state is going to procure, or last session. This year I'm hopeful that we'll see our overall target get updated to net zero. And I think there's something to be said about a constant drumbeat of things that are happening that you can also, who doesn't like to have a success? And you can say, after all your work has been done, you're doing something. And then I totally understand the folks who are saying we need to do much more and this isn't enough. Because let's be honest, if we didn't also have folks saying that, we probably wouldn't have gotten the compromise to begin with. So I think there needs to be people on all sides of the spectrum really pushing the legislature, because ultimately that is how we end up with something better than where we are.
Great. I'm sure other members of our panel could weigh in as well, but since we have a lot of questions, let's keep going. But if you do feel like you want to come back to this question or any other, feel free to just jump in, and share your thoughts on it. All right. So, Tom, what do we have next? Okay. Okay. From Laura Rotundo. I think you can all read the question as well, right? Sort of that, being able to have these conversations with your friends and family and coworkers and still maintain, civil, respectful, particularly when we're in the throes, like we are now of, presidential election and some very contentious issues. Who wants to
I can take this one.
Great. Jump in. Go for it.
Yeah. So interesting enough, thank you, Laura, for your question. I started a small little initiative or project. Actually, no, more like a protest. It was a silent protest that I did, a personal protest that I did here in Stoneham for the month of June. And basically what I did was I walked along the Greenway, the Tri-Community Greenway, which actually goes right behind my house, holding a Black Lives Matter sign. And then I created another sign on top of it that said, let's talk, ask me a question. And so I would do that almost daily. And I would always get mixed reactions. For the most part, they were pretty positive. And after each walk that I did, I would document and record my experience on my phone and sort of reflect and see, like, okay, what went wrong? What could I have said differently, or did I get my point across? And I just have to say, having these conversations, whether it's with friends, families, or even random strangers, especially with a very heated topic and a very heavy topic for most people, isn't going to be easy. But one thing that I always tell myself, and I try to tell myself this every day, is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so important, especially, with everything that's going on around us, whether it's the pandemic or the racial injustice that we're seeing basically on a daily level, is to get yourself to a point where you're constantly in situations that make you uncomfortable, because that is how you grow and that is how you learn. I'll be quite frank, Stoneham is a predominantly white community, and there aren't many people of color. And although that is changing, which is great. I find myself in situations where I'm having these difficult conversations or educating people, and it can be uncomfortable and it can be tiresome and burdensome because just because I'm a woman of color doesn't mean I have all the answers to everyone's questions and everyone's problems, but I'm also learning and I'm also growing. So I think it's just important to meet people where they're at and come from a place of kindness and compassion, because I know people can get heated. So always do it in a respectful manner. I think that's what I would advise to you, Laura, and anyone else who has a similar question, and meet people where they're at. And then once you're at a level where there's mutual understanding, take it a step further, no matter how uncomfortable it would make you feel.
Thank you, Farrah. That's such a great answer, and that's so great what you've been doing with those walks on the Tri-Community Greenway and kind of fostering those conversations with, in many cases, strangers, right? People you don't necessarily know at all. So, but you're so right. Part of this is being willing to sometimes feel uncomfortable and challenge yourself and others. And one of the things I always say to my team is, and this applies, I guess, as an elected official. If everyone's happy with what we're doing, then we're not doing our job. Mm-hmm. Because if you're really doing your job, you are going to shake things up, and there's going to be change, and not everybody's going to be happy with that. But you try to be respectful of everyone's and empathetic, and still work together for the change that we need. All right, Tom, what's the next question? Oh, okay. Good ways to train new volunteers. Amanda, this one seems like it's definitely up your alley, and probably Laura as well. So, but let's start with you.
Yeah, we can share this one. So I'm gonna get a shirt that says "I'm a chunker" because that's awesome. I loved listening to you. I was just like, I mean, literally, how many times have I described how you prepare things for volunteers as a diner menu? So I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, It's awesome. It's perfect. In terms of training volunteers, and also just bringing them in, it's not just training them, making them feel welcome, I think is part of training. Right off the bat, making whatever environment they're in, and we used to have campaign offices or headquarters or all of these sorts of things, making those environments feel welcoming and fun and not like gross and dirty or like really formal and opaque, and like a place you'd want to spend time where there are people who are fun. That is a big part of bringing new people in and making them want to stick around. So in a virtual sense, you have to figure out how to do that too. And I think what Laura said about having a social aspect is really important. You can keep people on a Zoom afterward and have more of a social hour as an option, but just as a way to kind of, keep it a little more fun and, make it a little less like not always on task. And people can do the sharing and the talking about, I talked to this crazy person, and, like that makes everybody feel part of a team. So I think for me, making training, just infusing it in how you bring new people in is critical. Those volunteers are representing your candidate, your cause. If they're not well trained, they are not going to do a good job in that endeavor. I mean, that is going to boomerang back. And also they're not going to enjoy themselves. They may feel intimidated. There are so many people who approach politics as, well, I don't want to talk to people. That's scary. And like what Farrah was talking about, okay, politics is about talking to people. And it's mostly about talking to people that are not like you in a million different ways. And we all need to get more comfortable with that. There are way too many of us that take ourselves out of the equation by just closing that off. So part of the training that you do with volunteers coming in is let's demystify that. I mean, again, none of us come out of the womb knowing how to do this, but there's ways to kind of get your sea legs and figure out how to do it that make you feel more confident, but also make it more satisfying. and that help you solve problems that you might encounter while doing it. And all of that is training. How to deal with a difficult voter at the door. How do you get out of that conversation? How do you listen rather than talk? So you have better results when you're done. How do you, be part of a team as opposed to, taking like a lot of energy by yourself? So I think having good resources when someone walks into the door, figuring out what they've done before, asking them questions. Have you campaigned before? Have you knocked doors or done phone calls before, whatever? Well, if they haven't, you have to start at a different place than if they have. You need to train them about the ethos of your effort, campaign, cause, whatever you're doing, so that they're good messengers. That's also part of it. But also, I think really important in any training for any volunteers is infusing the project with always saying thank you, infusing the project with no job is an unimportant job, and everybody does this work. Campaigns, in my opinion, that do not have that ethos are not campaigns I want to be part of, period. And I've walked away from campaigns that don't have that ethos. Like, I'm just not interested. And that's my standard. But I think it's a lot of people's standard. Because why would you want to be part of a campaign that doesn't have that ethos? And just making sure that people thank volunteers and make heroes out of them, because the work they're doing is so important. And a lot of them don't get the appreciation that they deserve. But making sure they know that there's someone they can ask questions of if they feel overwhelmed, that's also really important too. So I think I might have covered it all, but
you covered a lot of ground there. So
yes.
I'm sure Laura could add, but let's go to the next question because I'm cognizant of how many we have. And for folks, that are with us this evening, we will go a bit past 7. If that's okay with our panelists as well, because we know there's a lot of questions and we want to get to a few more. All right, super. All right, let's go to the next question from Ben Blair about calling representatives. Let's see about mobilization of phone, or more likely heard if we make a phone call about one. Okay, so this is, I guess, Ben's asking about contacting, a select board member, a school committee, or a state legislator, or even a member of Congress. Sort of how do you target your advocacy? One issue, multiple issues. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Laura, do you want to take that? Because you certainly, when you give action items, there's a lot of different things. And
yeah, there is. It's a good question. I've heard very mixed, things from different people that I've asked this question. It's a great question because I've asked it myself. I think it is probably better to focus on one thing, just because you can give a more detailed kind of, that I am, especially if you can personalize it, I think that makes it much more impactful. So if you're talking about education reform, and you can talk about how you have a special needs child, or if you can somehow personalize that question, I think it's much more impactful. So having kind of a laundry list that you are clearly running down, like, this is what I was told to say. And, it's a lot less impactful, I think, than saying, somehow making it very clear why this is important. So that would be my personal take, but you being the one that's getting the calls, maybe you add to that. That would be sort of my take. That would be how I would try to get people to do it. Obviously, you can't have a personal connection with every single thing you might be passionate about, but if you can, that's the ideal way to do it.
If I could just
go ahead, Farrah.
Quickly also add just on the back end. So I work in Senator Elizabeth Warren's office, and as you could probably imagine, we get a ton of calls that we have to field through. So just to echo what Laura said as well, I think it's best and it's easier for us if when you do call, and let's say you do get in touch with a live person, to just stick to one issue and just talk about what that issue is, what does it mean to you, what action item do you have for the senator herself? Like, is there a bill that she should be supporting or looking at, or is there an event that she needs to be present for? And obviously, our office numbers are out in the public, so you're more than welcome to call us numerous times about different issue areas, and we log every call as well. So if, let's say, we're getting 50 people calling us about one issue, that's definitely going to raise some flags in our office for sure. And it'll help us kind of sift through and prioritize what the senator should be paying attention to.
Thanks, Farrah. That's very helpful. And I can echo that in my office, in the state Senate office, we do the same thing. And we track, every call we receive from constituents, every email, try to track, Facebook messages and so on. And then we do like a weekly report in terms of how many constituents contacted us, in favor of a particular bill or opposed to a particular bill or whatever the different issues are. And that is, something that we take into consideration in terms of prioritizing, our work. And that's very helpful. I will add that I do think there's a hierarchy of sort of engaging with elected officials, sort of just filling out a template email that, a group will prepare and then you just send it off. That's something, certainly. But writing your own email where it's a little more personal, as you've heard from our panelists, is going to, register a little bit more. Obviously, calling and speaking to a staff person, or in some cases, even the elected official, is even more impactful. And then the most impactful is if you can try to connect, in person. And almost all elected officials, certainly at the municipal level and at the state level, have office hours. For example, I have office hours, in every community I represent. Obviously, in the days before COVID, we did it in person, and you could just come in person. You don't need an appointment. And that's almost always the case. You don't need an appointment. But even in the time of COVID, a lot of us are doing virtual office hours on Zoom. And you can just stop in. And that's a chance, again, to have that direct, face-to-face or virtual face-to-face with an elected official. And that I think it has even the most impact on influencing them on whatever the issue is you care about. All right, so let's go to our next question, Tom. All right, from Kelly Cobblemere. Kelly's a school committee member and looking for organizations that help train already elected officials. Okay, so that's an interesting one. So you're talking about folks who probably mostly at the local level, but we could use this at the state level too, are elected, and sort of the training or template for the work that they do. I don't know if any of our panelists have experience with this. I have a few thoughts, but I'll first hand it to anyone on the panel if you want to tackle this one. Okay, so I guess what I would say, Kelly, and again, the best folks to answer this are probably some of our local elected officials. Of course, you're a school committee member already. There are associations that are really, I think, are very helpful. So, for example, there's the Mass Association of School Committees, the MASC. You're probably familiar with them. And they do training sessions. And in fact, I went to speak at one of their training sessions about the Student Opportunity Act last year. They do prepare like standard resolutions that they then hand off to school committees to consider and adopt, that sort of thing. There's the Mass Municipal Association. They do a lot of training and have conferences and things for municipal elected officials. So those are very helpful. But then I would say if there's a particular issue you care a lot about that you want to lead on as a school committee member, find an organization that is expert on that issue. So if you wanted to do more work on racial justice within the school, within the school district, look for an organization that is doing great work on racial justice, racial equity issues. Talk to them, get to know them. They're likely to have resources that you can then bring to your local community. All right.
Could I actually say something really quick?
Yeah, sure.
One thing that you could also do, there was a question before about the tension between sort of grassroots and electeds, or pragmatism and compromise, or something like that. And this kind of, there are people that are involved in movements or community organizing, and then there are elected folks like Kelly. And so there are also community activists that are working on social justice issues, probably in her community. She could partner with those folks to get support for whatever she's trying to accomplish, or to hear about what they are interested in accomplishing, and maybe they can find something they agree on and get together and work on it, or something like that. But they could certainly have some energy that could perhaps help.
That's a great point. And in fact, a good example of that is in Winchester, for example, there are school committee members who are working together with a local organization called the Network for Social Justice in order to educate people about Native American history in our region and build support for changing the school mascot, as an example. So that's a good example of that. Okay, let's go to our next question from Eve Coffey. Thanks, Eve. Good to see you tonight. Let's see. When canvassing has been such an important part of getting out the vote. Oh, very good one. So yes, we're not really able to knock on doors right now. Not really doing face-to-face. So Amanda, how are we going to get out the vote so we can elect good folks in November?
Oh, Eve, you're speaking my language. I love canvassing. I have had to learn to love phone banking. I'm not happy about it, but here we are. I actually do know, and I will not say her name. She might be on here. I don't know, but there is a particular city councilor in my city of Malden who basically I helped manage her campaign, and the field program was almost entirely phone banking. This was pre-COVID, and I was like, oh boy, I hope this is going to work. Blah, blah, blah. She topped the ticket. It was, so phone calling is powerful, is the name of that game. So that's where we are and what we have to do. There are some other strategies, sort of virtual strategies. A lot of people do letters and postcarding and so forth. I'm a little skeptical as to the efficacy of that versus having an actual conversation with a human. I don't think there's any substitute. And whether it's in person or on a phone or like video like this, it's vastly more powerful. There's no substitute for it. So the work that I've been involved in so far with U.S. Senate campaigns and the presidential campaign this cycle, and also some state and local campaigns here in Massachusetts where we flipped some districts successfully, and all of it was done virtually. We're getting really good. Actually, we're getting a lot of practice on how to do this, how to reach voters, and also, frankly, how to do get out the vote, or GOTV, which is a term you might have heard of, which is usually the final stages of a campaign when you're trying to pull your supporters to the polls, make sure they remember, make sure they make a plan to vote, all that good stuff. Obviously, that is vastly more complicated in COVID time to do. And so there are lots of people all over this country that are planning their little hearts out on how to best do that, and putting a lot of energy and time and money into planning for that. And I'm actually very hopeful. I think there's been a ton of creativity and just a lot of work done on how we're going to do that. Not that there aren't going to be problems. I'm sure there will be. There's going to be some very troubling things that happen with voter suppression and all. It's not going to be good. But there are a lot of people that are working really hard to not just connect with voters in this time, but make sure that they are able to get to the polls safely and be heard. So,
and thanks, Amanda. Let me just add and remind everybody that at least in Massachusetts, we've passed a new law recently. Governor Baker signed it so that for all voters, registered voters, you'll actually be able to vote in the primary election on September 1st and then the general election November 3rd in any of three ways. You could vote by mail, no excuse, it's not
yours.
Right? Anybody can vote by mail. You just got it today, right? That's the application that you just send back to get your ballot that everyone's receiving now from the Secretary of State's office. Or you can vote early in person, just, like we've had early voting before, but we're going to have that for the primary and the general. And for the general, I think we're going to have 2 weeks of early voting, so lots of opportunities. And then, of course, we'll have voting on election day, obviously with the appropriate safety precautions. So the point here is there's lots of ways for people to vote. And that does also, I think, also complicate a little bit more the get out the vote, because it's not just getting people to vote on election day. It's making sure they vote one way or one of these ways, that they send in their ballot or vote early or vote election day. All right, let's see what our next question is. We are past 7, but again, we're going a little longer because we've got such a great panel and so many questions. This one is near and dear to my heart because most people wouldn't recognize that I'm an elected official and actually I'm also an introvert. Or people are social. Okay, who wants to take this one?
I can take it. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm like so extroverted. I like it's crazy, but
We're shocked to hear that, Laura.
Yeah, isn't that weird? But I do think that when it comes to politics, I do kind of shift a bit to the I side of things because of what we were just talking about. You know, the uncomfortable. I have work to do still in that area, and I know it, and I'm working on it. So I can totally speak to this. I would really encourage people to get on that ladder of engagement in whatever way they can. So like I said before, just sort of starting out as small and whatever is in your comfort zone, start with that first. And to, you know, if you're not ready to make phone calls and knock on doors, obviously don't be knocking on doors now, but you know, that isn't your jam, that's fine. There are other opportunities. There are still envelopes to stuff. There are still, you know, postcards to mail. There are still plenty of other things you can do that are just as valued as Amanda said before. There's no small job. Everything is important and moves that, you know, ball down the field. So we need to keep that in mind and do what you can do with it to start. And then obviously maybe you get more comfortable and more confident, and that becomes less of an issue.
A lot of campaigns need help with social media and data entry. Those are two things that are don't take a lot of interaction. The other thing I would advise, if you don't feel confident talking to people, find a buddy who's good at it and watch them do it. Nothing succeeds like watching someone else do it. You'll get all these good ideas about how you can get comfortable.
I would also like to second what Amanda just said and also share a personal experience as well. I used to have a terrible, terrible, terrible fear of talking to people over the phone. You know, and I would have to like handwrite, you know, scripts, or like if they gave me a script, I would have to like rehearse it over and over and over and over again before I even dialed the number. So totally understand, it's nerve-wracking and it's scary, but once you just dip your toe in it and you just try it once, it just gets easier and easier and easier. And now I talk to people, random strangers, as my job. So it does get easier.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Those are great answers. And just you know, don't let that inhibit you. I mean, you're so many people, you know, who are in the same boat, but you know, I think people have found that they, like our panel advised, you can do it. You know, find something that you're comfortable doing, build your comfort level, and then you will go from there. All right. I think we probably have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much to our terrific panelists. It was great to have you. Thank you for all the good work you're doing in our communities, organizing and affecting positive change. Thank you to everybody for your good questions. If you didn't get an answer, share that. You will see the questions on Facebook, so we'll try to still be able to follow up. And also, if you want to connect with any of our panelists and you don't have their contact information, just let us know, and we can share the contact information with you if you'd like to follow up with any of them further. But again, thank you, everyone. Special thank you to our terrific panelists. A great conversation this evening. Really want to encourage everybody who's thinking about getting involved in whatever the issue or cause or campaign is that you're interested in. Do it. Just do it. It'll feel good, and you can really make a difference. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.